Hello and welcome to the One Life Church devotional series where we cover the entire Bible in 20 months. Well, today's chapters are Isaiah 35 and Revelation chapter 1. So I'm going to be quick in Isaiah 35 because Revelation is a massive book to get our hands on. So Isaiah 35 is probably one of the most beautiful poems ever written. It's the description of a desert being turned into a garden. And it describes how Judah is restored after the Assyrian invasion. Also, obviously, there is the implication that Israel is restored today. If you look at modern-day Israel, it is like a garden in the middle of a desert, isn't it? And it does speak of the future restoration of the people of God. And so you can read that. It's an incredible chapter. It speaks about a highway of holiness where the redeemed walk on it, a magnificent passage which is applicable to you as part of the restored, the redeemed of the Lord. Now, the reason I'm standing in front of this old house, many will look at it, someone's just trying to clean the front of it at the moment, but this is a dilapidated old house. No one's lived in here for more than 30 years. You could say this house is over. It's done. It's going to be smashed to the ground, but I've got a sneaky suspicion this house is going to have a second innings. It's going to have another go. And so as we look at the book of Revelation, it speaks about the end. See, a complete breakdown, a complete destruction of everything that we know today. But there's also, at the end of it, an incredible hope for us who believe. And so this book is shrouded in mystery. There's all sorts of weird creatures wandering across its pages. There's scary characters. There's the Antichrist. There's Armageddon. But all these things actually are the support actors. The main actor is Jesus. It's about him. In fact, this book is called The Revelation of Jesus Christ. It's given by Jesus, but it's of Jesus because he is inextricably linked to the end of the world. Many commentators have sort of given up. You know, Calvin didn't even write a commentary on this, the famous Calvin. Winston Churchill said of Russia, when he was trying to understand Russia, he said, Russia is a riddle wrapped in a mystery inside an enigma. Many people think the book of Revelation is like that. It's a mystery wrapped in a riddle inside an enigma. And so there are various interpretive methods. Some people believe, they're called idealists, that it was just all metaphoric, that there's nothing in the book of Revelation that is actually literal. It's all figurative. The problem is real names are mentioned, real events are mentioned. Then you have the preterists, and the preterists believe that this all happened around about, 1,500 years ago through the reign of Rome, that it's all done and dusted, and that the Great Destruction was talking about the destruction of Jerusalem, which happened in AD 70. The problem with that is that the book itself says that it's about the end times. And so quite clearly, 1,500 years later, that was not the end times. And then you got the historicists who say that the tribulation has been playing out since Jesus till today. The problem with a pure historicist view is that then you've got to try and superimpose people, actual historical figures, into the text and scripture. So, maybe Hitler played a role, maybe Gorbachev, he's got that funny thing on his head, played a role. The Catholic Church, I believe some people. And this becomes quite divisive, and it becomes quite difficult to try if you're interpreting it that way. But the way I see it is what many would call a futurist view of the book of Revelation. Is that the first chapter is opening and revealing Jesus. Second and third chapter is Jesus standing amongst the churches, which is historical. That is, those churches existed, that has happened. Chapter 4 and 5 is basically looking at the throne room of heaven, and it's a discussion which is in the future about the end of the world. And then chapter 6 through to 21 is what we would call the last days, and that's that we are on the in Afrikaans, I'd say op die drempel. We're on the edge of that. You can see I've been hanging out in Cape Town, can't you? But it's about the future. Now, let's have a look at what chapter 1 is all about. So chapter 1 says it's a revelation from Jesus. So Jesus uses an angel and he speaks through John and he says, write this down. Essentially, this is the narrative. John, old man at this stage, theologians say they reckon he was in his 90s. He was on the Lord's Day, that Sunday. He was on the island of Patmos, which was a penal island. He was under arrest there because of his faith. Yeah, church tradition tells us he had been tortured, boiling water had been poured on him. He was a lonely figure. And on that day, having a church service all by himself, Jesus appears to him. It's an incredible picture of Jesus. Look at this. The hair on his head was white as wool. His eyes like blazing fire. His feet burnished bronze. His voice, the sound of rushing waters. In his right hand were 7 stars, and coming out of his mouth with a sharp double-edged sword. His face was like the shining of the sun in all its brilliance. And basically, Jesus is talking to John, the disciple that was very dear to him, and he's going to tell him about the future. But then he says to all who read this book, blessed is the one who reads aloud the words of this prophecy, and blessed are those who hear it and take it to heart. There is a blessing in studying this book of Revelation. I'm looking forward to studying it with you. Chapter 2 tomorrow.